not to get too into the macroeconomics right here, but I think the economy is under pressure right now. And going back to the earlier point where traditionally farms operate on very, very thin margins to begin with. So, with gas prices where they're at, that's going to mean fertilizer is more expensive. With equipment being more expensive, that's even less cash flow into the farm. So I think where and how this community can get creative to either self-service some of these needs or use additive in a creative way to get additional productivity or keep equipment going, I think there's a lot of upside there.
Welcome back to Agile Talks. I'm Sean Kaine, here always with my colleague and fearless leader, Mr. Mark Batty. How you doing today, Mark?
Good, man. How you doing?
Fantastic. So today we're talking about a data point that stopped me in my tracks. 3D printing in agriculture grew 87% year over year, outpacing the industry average of 70%, which is already crazy, right? Agriculture, not aerospace, not defense, not medical, but farming. So the question we want to dig into is why? Is this aging equipment with no replacement parts? Seasonal urgency when a broken component during harvest isn't just inconvenient, it's financially devastating? Supply chain pressure, or does this reflect something deeper about how agricultural operations are beginning to think about parts, inventory, and resilience? So Mark, what's your first reaction when seeing agriculture leading the pack on additive?
Yeah, not totally surprised, right? I think no matter what industry that we work with, if you take a step back and you look at the problem statements or the challenges that industry is facing, it kind of fits a lot of them, right? High mix, low volume, really, really long gestational periods. The owner operators are, battling margins plus all kinds of other pressures. So I'm not necessarily surprised. When I read the article, for sure, a little, farming, you don't really think of kind of like tech forward, but getting into it and even looking at some of our customers, not necessarily totally a new idea. So yeah, very excited to talk about the topic today.
All right. So how big a role does aging equipment play? Agriculture runs on long asset cycles, equipment that's 15, 20, 30 years old with discontinued parts and no OEM support. How significant is this dynamic?
Yeah, it's massive. And, put ourselves in a real case scenario. In Pennsylvania, you go past a lot of farms daily and you see the operators of those farms with a mixture of fleet of equipment, right? And, it's on them to try to keep that farm alive, right? Try to keep, many times it's multiple generations to keep it in the family and going. So if you talk about creativity and putting a lot of problem solving on the backs of these individuals owning these farms, it's a big one. So how long or how do I keep this piece of equipment that is a major capital investment for my family or for the company? How do I keep it plowing or seeding or irrigating as long as I can is a massive challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So seasonal urgency is something that most industries don't face the way that farming does, right? So a broken part during a harvest can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost yield, right? How does that time pressure change the value proposition for additive?
So it's urgency. And again, if you look at where the majority of the United States farming takes place, it's really in the central part of the United States. So for you and I, to sign on Amazon and hit Prime and be able to have a part or some type of product by this afternoon is a very normal routine. You look at, this community based in the central part of the United States, whether it's Kansas or Oklahoma or Missouri, right? Like they are away from kind of a traditional supply chain. So it may take days, if not weeks. And to your point, those windows of opportunities for the farming community are small and they're finite. So if you miss kind of harvest or planting or kind of that upkeep window, even by a couple days, it could be detrimental for the season. So when you think about 3D printing and kind of the support that additive can bring, it's an amazing opportunity, right? So you're talking about things essentially on demand. You're talking about, high mix, low volume parts. You're also giving the farmers an amazing ability to customize their solution. So, you and I don't really think about it, but different soil types, different plants, right? Different crops, different pieces of equipment. These all can require certain tweaks to even kind of standard machinery that they have. So having that ability to really right size the equipment for their situation is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the farmers have always improvised, right? That welding and fabricating, working around broken parts for generations. Is 3D printing just a sophisticated version of that, or something fundamentally different?
I think, again, big shout out to this community. They really are the Swiss Army knives. Whatever they need to do to keep that equipment running, or to keep their animals healthy, or to keep their crops going, they really do have kind of an endless bag of tricks. I think this is just another tool in their toolbox. And where I see it, if you even give the comparison to like car clubs or like motorcycle clubs, where there's this community of sharing of, hey, I'm having a tough time finding this part, or what is your recommendation to fix this piece of equipment. I really see additive bringing almost a decentralization of innovation to this community, where, is it possible for forums to start coming up and saying, hey, this is how I fixed it, or sharing models of 3D printed parts, or asking recommendations on different types of materials to fix things. I see it as a huge opportunity for this community to really utilize this technology in a completely new way, which is really exciting. It's really exciting.
So do you think, for a distributor or an OEM serving agriculture right now, do you think it's a threat? Is it an opportunity, or do you think it's both?
I think it could be an amazing addition to their service model. This is a challenge that we try to help a lot of our OEMs with is, hey, what is the right time, and how do I exit, product support or equipment support with grace and strategy? And there are times that you have to move on. But, imagine having maybe a 3D service, right, where you'd offer kind of additional support for another 5 years or another 10 years, or working with maybe a company like ours to hand off some of those parts so the customers know where to go to. They have technical support when they need it. I think it's super interesting. It's almost like an extended warranty for your car. So there are other examples in other industries where you have kind of that next level of support. I've not really seen it kind of done with extreme strategy yet, but for sure an opportunity.
Okay. Yeah. So this monster 87% growth, is it a one-time spike driven by supply chain disruptions, or a general structural shift in how these agricultural operations think about parts inventory? How do you read that?
I think it's going to be consecutive years of growth, Sean. I mean, if not to get too into the macroeconomics right here, but I think the economy is under pressure right now. And going back to the earlier point where traditionally farms operate on very, very thin margins to begin with. So, with gas prices where they're at, that's going to mean fertilizer is more expensive. With equipment being more expensive, that's even less cash flow into the farm. So I think where and how this community can get creative to either self-service some of these needs or use additive in a creative way to get additional productivity or keep equipment going, I think I think there's a lot of upside there. I think there's a lot.
Totally agree. So what lands for me is that agriculture didn't just adopt 3D printing because it was trendy, right? It adopted it because it had real urgent, it had a real urgent, expensive problem, and additive was the best answer available. So that's how technology adoption is supposed to work, right? So at 87% growth, And when 80% growth, it looks like, it tells you that there's a lot of unmet needs still sitting in sectors we haven't even paid attention to yet, right? So thanks for listening to Agile Talks. I'm Sean Kaine, always with Mark Batty, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Sean. Have a great day.